So here we go. This is the first of 4 recordings on the book of Titus. My name is Wilrens Titus. I'm Dutch, but I've lived in Germany for many years working with Youth with a Mission. For all of that time I've had an involvement with the School of Biblical Studies, the SBS, and I continue to teach in this school and other Bible courses. Now, in our own school in Germany, we usually had Titus in the first few weeks. We used it as a model for our students to learn and practice the principles of inductive Bible study, of discovering Bible study. And that's what we'll do in this series as well. I'm very happy to be your tour guide, sort of, on this journey. And in the process, we'll continue to practice principles of inductive Bible study. And I hope you'll be amazed at what we'll discover in just 2 pages of this book. Now, it will be helpful and make this recording more useful if you have read the book, preferably even more than once. So, in case you have not read the book recently, I suggest you pause here. Just stop for a moment and read Titus. It only takes a few minutes. Okay, now we're really ready to go. First, an observation question. What is this? I called it a book, but that's a bit of an exaggeration. 2 pages. Now, I don't think the question is hard to answer, especially not if I reformulate it, make it a bit more specific. What type of literature is this? It's not difficult, but important. With any text or document we study, it's a crucial question. Because we would read, say, a newspaper differently from a fairy tale or an instruction manual. So, what is this? Well, obviously, we are looking at a letter. And I expect that does not surprise you. No doubt you knew there are letters in the Bible and that Titus is one of them. But it is important to be aware of it. Usually, a letter is written for a clear and concrete reason, an occasion, and with an equally concrete purpose. The author and the reader, or readers, are on the inside of this conversation, and we are not. We are outsiders. In other words, the author and the reader have some sort of relationship, and there are things that have happened before the letter was written, and that play a role in the correspondence. The author and his readers know what those things are. They do not need to be explained. But we don't know. It will help our understanding if we take time to uncover the occasion, the purpose, and some of the history preceding the writing. In this case here, to answer questions like, who is Titus? What is his relationship with Paul? What is going on here? Next question, how do we know it is a letter? Other than perhaps the title in your Bible, which is not part of the original document, but someone else's opinion on it, how can we tell? Well, as soon as you've read 2 or more letters in the Bible, you probably recognize the pattern. Letters have certain things in common. Look at Titus and Philemon here. The same elements appear in both. I've marked them in color. They both begin with the name of the author, Paul. Then we learn to whom the letter is addressed. Often, at least with Paul, there is a benediction, usually grace and peace, and a prayer or thanksgiving, or both, as in Philemon. The way both letters end also looks similar. There are greetings, in Titus without names, in Philemon several people are mentioned, and there is a concluding blessing or benediction. Grace be with you. Most letters in the New Testament share this pattern with these elements. This is what letters looked like in the ancient world. There are exceptions, Hebrews and 1 John especially, who probably should not call them letters at all. There's something else. They have virtually none of the elements that real letters show. Titus, by the way, lacks one element that appears in most of Paul's letters. There is no thanksgiving or prayer. Now, we're doing observation, so I'm not going to ask why. We'll do that later. Right now, we simply notice this, keep it in mind for later, and move on. There is one more thing we can say about the type of literature. If you already know the New Testament well enough, you may have noticed that Titus has much in common with two other of Paul's letters, 1st and 2nd Timothy. For one, they share similar topics, and also words and expressions, and even problems. Besides, all three are written to an individual, unlike all the other letters in the New Testament, except for 3 John. Other letters are written to one or more churches. Even Philemon mentions the church at his home. So these three form their own group. They are often called the pastoral epistles. This is a bit misleading. Neither Titus nor Timothy is a pastor. The word conjures up all sorts of associations and ideas that are very far from the first century reality. And Paul is not providing pastoral care either. But the designation pastoral epistles is firmly established, so I guess we're stuck with it. There is more we can say about the type of letter this is, but I will wait until we have looked more closely at the structure. And with this, we have already answered one of the basic questions to ask of any book in the Bible, or even any book or document at all. We will look at the other basic questions as well, but first we will take time to look at the structure of Titus. Perhaps you have been told and taught to do paragraph titles. The slide here shows the first verse of each paragraph in Titus. It is worth doing this before listening to the continuation of this recording, and you may even take some time to try and see how this material is organized. Which smaller units of thought or subtopics do you recognize? If you have a list of paragraph titles, where would you draw a line to mark the boundary between two topics or two units? Pause at the end of this sentence and give it a try if you want, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. This shows my paragraph titles in English. There's often more than one way to look at the structure of a document, at the way it has been put together. By identifying the elements of a letter in Titus, for instance, we have already looked at the structure of this text in one way. In addition, often it is possible to identify units of thought or units dealing with different topics. There may even be clear structure markers in the text, statements or elements that indicate one unit is coming to an end or a new unit is beginning. But I must say I don't find the structure of Titus very easy or clear, and there are different opinions about it. There are those who split the book at 2 verse 11, where Paul begins to speak of grace. So then we have two halves. The second half of the letter has more theology in it, that is true. But it also includes direct instruction of the kind we have in the first half of the letters. Therefore, others divide the book into three parts, more or less according to the chapters we have. After all, in 2 verse 1, Paul switches from the Cretans to Titus, and in 2:15, Paul summarizes his message so far, creating a bit of a pause in the flow to then start afresh in 3 verse 1. Well, that's okay, but it's not great. There's yet another way to look at the structure. When you observe carefully, you will probably notice quite a few contrasts. There are good people and troublesome people, even worthless people. There is good and desirable behavior that is to be promoted, and there is bad and harmful behavior that is to be discouraged and put on hold. Paul goes back and forth between these categories. This is called interchange, and interchange is really what makes the structure and organization of Titus. Interchange is especially visible in this way. Paul goes back and forth between directives, what Titus is to do and how people in the church are to behave, and reasons for his directives, or in other words, the why of what Titus is to do. This interchange runs through the whole body of the letter. Looks like this. The column on the left gives the reasons for the instruction that's given in the verses listed in the right-hand column. The first explicit reason why Titus is to do what he is to do is the character and culture of the audience in chapter 1, verse 10 through 16. The other reasons given in 2 verse 11 and following and 3 verse 3 and following are theological. These passages contain doctrine or teaching. The reason is who God is and what God has done. And in fact, the opening of the letter, the first 4 verses, fits into this category as well. It also contains doctrine, truth about God, and as such, even though it's implicit, it's part of the reason why Titus and Paul do what they do. This makes for small units, smaller than I would normally like, since most of them are only one paragraph. Normally, I would look for units that are more the size of a chapter and include several paragraphs. But by all appearances, this is the structure that Paul has given to his letter. At this point, I want to return to what I said earlier. There's more to say about the kind of letter this is. Here is another little exercise you may want to do. Scan through the text and mark or write down all the imperatives that are directed to Titus. That is, every verb that directly orders or tells Titus, do this or do that. If you're interested, pause here and do this exercise. Only takes a few minutes, then we'll talk about it. Here are the ones I found. Rebuke, teach, urge, show, declare, exhort, rebuke, let no one disregard, remind, I want you to insist, avoid, have nothing to do. How would you describe the tone or the atmosphere of this list and of the letter as a whole? That's another good observation question, by the way. I would say the tone is a bit terse. Paul is short and to the point and quite direct. The fact that there is no thanksgiving, as we observed earlier, different from most of Paul's letters, adds to this directness. What do we make of this? Notice we are now moving into interpretation. I would like an explanation for these observations. We may be tempted to think that Paul is unfriendly, in a hurry, or he's bossing around. Is he being a big shot here? Well, I think there's a better explanation. In most letters, Paul is writing into a situation of conflict or controversy, and at times to an audience he does not know personally. In such cases, it is important to establish some goodwill, to win the audience and establish rapport with them. Paul often takes time for this in the opening of his letters. One way Paul does this is thanking God for his readers and so affirming their strengths. But there is no need for this here. Titus, as we will see, is a trusted co-worker. He does not need to be won over or persuaded. He is already on Paul's side. and much or perhaps all of what Paul writes is not new to him. With this letter, Paul is not bossing him around, but giving him a mandate for a tough task. There is even a technical term for such a letter, in Latin, mandatum principiis. Notice that this term includes the words mandate and principles. It's the kind of letter a ruler or official might write for his agent, for more than two, his representative, a governor, etc., defining his task or mission and perhaps adding more detailed instruction, principles and guidelines and some words of advice and encouragement. And by the way, by defining the type of literature this way, we are also answering the question why Paul wrote this letter. What is his purpose? What was this letter meant to accomplish? Again, most of its content must have been familiar to Titus. The letter was not written to inform him what his task was or why it had to be done. It is highly unlikely that Paul had not told him before he left, and the theology, the doctrine or teaching in the letter, cannot have been new to him either. Paul's purpose is not to inform, but to strengthen and empower Titus for his task, to authorize him. And with this, we have answered yet another basic question next to type of literature that we can ask of any document. What is its purpose? And in the next unit, we will deal with the remaining basic questions.